I'm Dr. Nathalie Beauchamp, and this is What the Heck, the podcast that dives into what the heck is going on in the world of health and well-being, explores how to optimize your mindset and your lifestyle, and shares practical tools so that you can achieve your fullest potential. Join me and a special guest each week as we discuss everything from biohacking to diet personalization to cutting-edge detox methods to setting and staying accountable to your goals. Ready to find out what the heck you can do to stay healthy, sharp, and at the top of your game? Let's get started. Hello, this is Dr. Nathalie Beauchamp, and welcome to the What the Heck podcast, where every week we cover all kind of different health hacks and health topics. And today I'm really excited to have as a guest a good friend of mine, Dr. Steven Geanopulos. I've known Dr. G, as he likes to be called. I don't call him that one-on-one. I call him Steve. But I'm really excited to have him doing the podcast today. I had Steve come to our expo here in Ottawa last year, where he gave an amazing lecture. Actually, I still have patients and community people in the community talking about it. So we could probably have done 4 different topics with Dr. Steve, but we picked today brain health because I know it is a very hot topic, because we're talking a lot about brain plasticity and what we can do. And it's also sadly a hot topic because more and more people are suffering from dementia and Alzheimer and other cognitive issues. So I thought it was really apropos for us to do a brain health. So welcome to the podcast, Steve.
Oh, thank you for having me, Nathalie. It's a pleasure to speak with you always.
Great. So why don't we start by you telling us a little bit more about yourself and how you got to focus more on brain health, because you are, like me, a chiropractor by training. So tell us a little bit more about your story on that front.
Sure. I graduated from chiropractic college back in the mid-90s, 1996. And while I was in my last year at school, I was accepted into the Carrick Institute postgraduate neurology program, which I'm very proud of, because it was a 300-hour program, or a 3-year program, where I certainly wouldn't be able to do it now. It took a lot of work and a lot of time to get those studies done. And when I finished that program, I felt well equipped to understand not just the nervous system, which I understood from my chiropractic education, but I understood how the body and the brain really communicate. And that, kind of brought it above the spine for me. And shortly after that, I started to work directly with people who are suffering from everything from, developmental delays like autism and ADHD, all the way up to dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and strokes and sports concussion in the middle. And over the years, in the late 90s and early 2000s, we started to see that if you had a brain problem, there was other things going on as well. And that makes sense. We know the brain controls our digestion and our blood pressure and our so many other functions, that if you had brain dysfunction, there was always something visceral going on. So I started to pursue my education in functional medicine as well. So I feel that my education is 3-pronged. It's chiropractic, which is where all of my philosophy comes from. Remove interference is the first and foremost in everything I do. The brain, or understanding neurology and neuroscience, and then of course understanding the biochemistry and the immunology of what circulates through our blood.
Yeah, it's and I was listening a few weeks back of the docu-series GMO Revealed, and which you were interviewed on. Great job. And I knew the power of nutrition before that docu-series, but I tell you, it really nailed it for me, of really paying more attention of what I was eating in terms of the food not being genetically modified and organic. And I'm sure we can talk a little bit more about that. So let's discuss a little bit more what you're seeing, I guess, in your practice when it comes to brain and brain health. And this show is called the What the Heck Show. And then I'll ask you the question maybe before or after, wherever you see fit to discuss. What makes you go, what the heck, when it comes to brain health and maybe health in general, that you see that I won't say errors that people are making, but things that people could do that would give them, such a bigger outcome and greater health?
Yeah. So, wow. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and answer that question really quick right now because it just popped into my head. But really, it has to do with blood sugar.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Because there's, and you might be thinking to yourself, oh, he's going to talk about diabetes, pre-diabetes. I don't have anything to worry about. Well, hold on a second. It's not about diabetes and pre-diabetes. Those are disease states. It has more to do with what really affects us as we get older. So there are basically three things that are going to take us all out, regardless of how old we live to be. And I'm not smart enough to know how old anyone is going to live to be. But I do know that there are three things that take us all out, regardless if we live to 110 or if we live to 80. And that is going to be neurodegeneration, so Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, that type of thing. It's cardiovascular disease or cerebrocardiovascular disease, where what causes heart attacks. It's also, you can lump in there diabetes, obesity, etc., or metabolic derangement, we can call it. And then, of course, there's cancer. Now, number 4 is accidents, and that's way down the line. So really, it's those top 3 that we all should be thinking about because, yes, every one of us has a family history of all 3. Let's not pretend that we don't. That's not to say those conditions are genetic. However, what we want to know is how can we protect ourselves from our health declining before our lifespan is over. So we want our health span to track with our lifespan together. Yeah. If our health span drops off and our lifespan continues, well, then we're in trouble. We're costing our neighbors a lot of money. We're costing our family a lot of grief, and we're suffering. And no one's interested in that. Yeah. So how can we get that to track?
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that with the blood sugar. I have this discussion almost every time I see my dad. Dad, are you eating? Probably he's on his own now. And he's like, yeah. And, I went to the doctor. My blood sugar is great. He still eats dessert. Like, to him, his blood sugar is good. He doesn't have diabetes. He's good to go. And I've had the discussion many times. I just shake my head. But I think that's often what people are thinking, that if the signs are not there, we're fine. And now we're even seeing more how this blood sugar or dysregulation is affecting the brain. So I'll let you continue on that.
Yeah, sure. No, because the blood sugar story affects all 3 of those conditions that we're talking about. Blood sugar is going to impact how well you deliver blood through your vascular system, through your blood vessels. So cerebrovascular disease is impacted by blood sugar. Alzheimer's can be triggered on many different levels. One is the microvasculature, or the small, tiny blood vessels that feed your brain. If they are suffering from disease, well, they're not going to deliver nutrition and oxygen to your brain cells, and that can trigger neurodegeneration. But you also can trigger neurodegeneration by having abnormal blood sugar responses. Sometimes we call Alzheimer's a type 3 diabetes, right? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there's cancer, where we know the relationship between cancer and sugar is very strong. There's debate as to the mechanism of what's going on, but it seems to be clear that how our cells or our cancer cells are fed energy will determine if they're able to grow or not. So sugar really plays a big role, and not having diet. Let's say you're just genetically gifted and you can easily dispose of your blood sugar.
Like my dad.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't have diabetes, maybe you don't even have prediabetes. But what you're doing is you're asking the hormone system that regulates blood sugar to work incredibly hard. And anytime you have a system in the body that's overworked, there will be fatigue. And the fatigue doesn't necessarily always mean diabetes. It can mean hormonal dysregulation. So I always say, women ask me all the time, over the age of 40 about their hormones. And I always go straight to the hormones related to blood sugar first: cortisol, insulin, because all of the sex hormones that they really want to talk about are downstream from that. Mm-hmm. So you really have to get those right. And I'll finish the point on this. Glucose is sugar, right? So glucose is so important to human life that if you get no glucose in your diet, zero, if you are the Inuit in the Arctic Circle and all you eat is blubber, you will still, if I check your blood, have a blood level of glucose in the 70s. Meaning, glucose is so important to you, you don't have to eat it.
The body will make it, right?
You make it, and you make it sufficiently. Almost all of the glucose you eat has to be disposed of. And some people say, well, I go to the gym and I work out. Yeah, okay. Well, I don't think many people work out as much as the Inuit did, 10,000 years ago. It's not like you're working out so much that you have to constantly feed yourself bananas and sugars and carbohydrates and all that to have energy. So the blood sugar story really is a huge factor. And I do believe it's going to become the #1 cause of liver transplants in the future. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Yeah. So I guess, to segue into brain health here, is sugar is the big thing. And it's funny, just this morning I saw a quote on Facebook. It was a keto group, and it said something like, people are all worried that I'm on a keto diet now, and they were not when I was eating Pop-Tarts and chocolate bar for breakfast. And then it was kind of funny, but it is true. So
hashtag Jillian Michaels.
Is it? Okay, well, I didn't know who it came from, but
no, I'm saying hashtag Jillian Michaels because she just had a here in the States, she just had a big controversy about keto.
I wasn't aware of that. Maybe I should stay on social media a little bit longer. So, but I guess my point with this is that the cancer, the Alzheimer, the metabolic issues are all lifestyle issues. And why do we have so much more Alzheimer and dementia? And I think I know the answer to that is our lifestyle and the fact that we've been consuming so much sugar. And I think people are not realizing the impact of sugar on their brain. And just to go back to my dad example, he does have some cognitive and brain issues, but in his mind, with the education that he's getting from what's around, people are not making that connection. So I think for a brain health point of view, we have to pay attention, not just for the diabetic part of things or other components, but also for the brain, because it has a huge impact. So let's dig a little bit deeper on this brain health and what people can do. And I like to go at it by hacks. So what would be, 3, 4, or 5 hacks, whatever time we have here, Steve, for people to have better brain health? But before you do this, I'm going to ask the audience, what are your brain health issues? So is it brain fog? Is it fatigue? Because as you mentioned earlier, that it may not manifest itself as diabetes, but it will manifest itself as fatigue. And I have to say, being in practice for 24 years, I can't believe the amount of people that are coming in, young people with fatigue and, early diagnosis of fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome. And they're like in their early 20s. So fatigue could be a symptom. Is it lack of concentration? So, share with us what your brain concerns are, and we will comment back, as we can. So yeah, go ahead, Steve.
So if we were to look at a brain cell as kind of like an automobile, right? You take an automobile, you have, oxygen and gasoline, you put it into the engine, it blows up, and you make energy, right? The energy we call horsepower for cars. And then out of the tailpipe of the car comes pollution. Well, a cell is very similar. You take oxygen and glucose, you put it into the engine of the cell, we call it the mitochondria, and out comes energy, and we call that ATP. So you get 38 units of ATP with that formula. And out of the tailpipe of the mitochondria, you have oxidation. And oxidation is basically electrons bouncing around and poking holes in things. And, when you hear the term antioxidants, that means the things that are in our fruits and vegetables that might be able to absorb some of those electrons and prevent their damage. Well, I would say that understanding that and knowing that oxygen and glucose yield a certain amount of oxidation and a certain amount of energy. And you mentioned before keto. And of course, if your brain cells are using a different kind of fuel, okay, let's say it's a hybrid engine, you put oxygen and ketone into the mitochondria, you can get 146 units of energy with a lot less pollution. And that's desirable for all of us over the age of 40, I would say. There's an argument for people younger too, but the truth is when you're 20 years old or in high school and you're playing football and hopping fences and chasing girls, you want to function like a powerful, muscle car, right? That pollutes a lot and gets low gas mileage, but is fun and sexy. But as you get older, you don't need that old muscle car to do your errands. You probably benefit from a 2018 Toyota Prius that's much more fuel efficient and makes less pollution. And that's what we want for our brain. We want to live longer, or we want to live well as long as we live, right?
Yeah. Totally.
So with that being said, moving your body into a state of ketosis, not 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 12 months out of the year, but being able to cyclically go in and out of ketosis is a very wise thing to do. And learning how to do that, or meeting doctors or practitioners or even websites where you can learn that, is a very good idea.
Because it decreases brain inflammation, bottom line, right?
Bottom line, decrease oxidation means decrease inflammation. And by the way, those 3 disease states I mentioned before that are taking us all out, they're all, basically inflammatory states, right?
Yeah.
And inflammation is the real story there.
Yeah. And I'll ask you this question because I know I'm getting that question all the time. Okay, the keto trend. People are saying, oh, it's a trend. It's going to be like everything else. It's going to fade. I'd be curious to hear what your answer is to your patient, because I know that I get that asked all the time.
Yeah, it's what's your motivation, right? Is your motivation to look good in a bikini and be able to go to the, lose body fat, keep muscle mass, all that stuff is great. However, what I think what's happening in the general public is they're saying, I have to be on a ketogenic diet, and in order for this to work for me, and I have to do it all the time. And as you know as well as I do, I use these principles and have been using them on brain injury. I've been using it with cancer patients. I've been using it with people who are very, very sick. And I use it from a medicinal standpoint, but I also live it myself. And I am not in ketosis 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. However, I probably spend several hours in ketosis every day. So I find that a keto-friendly lifestyle is a good idea. There's 4 basic avenues for that I think are helpful. One is practicing some form of time-restricted eating, or intermittent fasting, people like to call it. This idea that breakfast, lunch, and dinner, is the way we're supposed to live is kind of just made up, really. Or the idea that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And again, it could be for you, but it doesn't have to be. So intermittent fasting, a higher fat diet. Let's be realistic. The experiment with low fat has been a complete and utter failure. And raising the level of healthy fats is very, very important. And by healthy fat, we don't only mean unsaturated. There are healthy saturated fats as well. And then, of course, I like to talk about exercise as a way to increase ketosis. But I think people can look at exercise in the wrong way. When they think of aerobic, they think about doing a class that get like a high intensity interval training class where they get their heart rate really high and they're doing all kinds of movements. When actually aerobic means under your aerobic threshold, which means if you're over the age of 40, especially, the formula is 180 minus your age. So it's a very good way to look at it. So if you're 40 years old, you don't really want your heart rate to go above 140 for your long duration, low intensity exercise. Okay. And that should probably make up 65 to 75% of your workout time for the week. You still can do high intensity interval training, but shorten it and do it less frequently as you get older. The reason being is when you have the long duration, low intensity under that heart rate, you're going to burn more ketones. If your heart rate goes above a certain threshold, you'll demand glucose. And if you don't have it, you'll make it. You'll break down your own muscle. And the last thing we want to do as we get older is break down muscle. We want to keep our muscle.
Yes.
And then the fourth way is supplementing ketones. And that's something that's not necessary. It's helpful to get you into that state of physiology. It could take 3, 6, 12 months for some people to really efficiently get there. But I supplement ketones even after doing this for a few years because I'll use it as a pre-workout sometimes. I don't need it, but I can tell you I needed it when I first got started. And a supplemental ketone could be an MCT oil. It could be an MCT powder. It could be ketone salts. There's a lot of them on the market now. I have my favorites. But those are the 4 things I like to do to increase ketogenic activity in the body.
So you would say then that the first hack would be for people to look into a more keto friendly diet. And I think it's always the extreme, right? Unfortunately, people go all out, or they think it's a one size fits all. And so that's also one of the message that I have in with my patient and in my book, that there is no one size fits all, and you have to find what works for you. And as you said earlier, it's what is your purpose? And I think as we get older, our purpose is to live longer and live well, because I've shared that with you and we've had some conversation. My mother is in a nursing home with Alzheimer, and it is a reality for me in my own life to see, sadly, her cognitive decline and how, her as a person is no longer there. And we don't want that for ourselves, and we don't want that for others, right?
Natalie, can I share a story that
yes,
will include a hack? Will include a hack for some of your families out there. So, I was deeply moved by what you went through last year with your mom, and we've all seen it. There's no one who's listening to this who's not touched by Alzheimer's. It's going to exceed heart disease at some point in the near future, just from a number standpoint. And so my mom just turned 80, and we were at a backyard event this past summer, at the end of the summer, and my sister-in-law came up and said, "Hey, your mother just told the same story 3 times in the last 2 hours." And I said, "Yeah, all right, well, so do I. I tell the same story over and over." And my mom is pretty sharp. I mean, she's got a quick wit, and she's pretty sharp. But I take these things very seriously, and she's my mom. And if you're a practitioner out there, don't be your mother's doctor. Send your family to the people you trust the most, because you don't want to see what you don't want to see. But anyway, I took a plate, the back of a paper plate, and I gave her a Sharpie pen, and I asked her to draw a clock and make it 3 o'clock on the clock. And what she drew was so ridiculous and so not a clock. And she stared at it and was looking at me in complete disbelief that she couldn't draw the clock. And then I showed her my watch. I said, "What time is it?" And she looked at it and she said, "Yeah, it's 10 after 10. She goes, "Why can't I draw this?" I mean, she cognitively understood that she couldn't do it. And this is a test that's used by neurologists sometimes to look and diagnose early cognitive decline. Now, it's not something you want to do with your mom and then become alarmist. But it's interesting that my mother shows no other sign of cognitive decline other than drawing that clock. And then if you Google the coconut oil clock study, and you see how increasing medium chain triglyceride type of fat in someone's diet can actually change their ability to draw a clock. It's pretty amazing. So, and I want to tell that story because it is a hack that we all can use in our aging family members if we feel that there might be something going on, or we'd like to catch it as early as we can.
Mm-hmm. So for sure to introduce the MCT in our diet, can you tell us, you talked about the exogenous ketone, but what other hacks do you think people can do to make sure that their brain stays sharp? And, you know, a lot of people will do the puzzle, the crosswords and so forth. So from that exercise, brain exercise point of view, do you have some favorites that you recommend to your patients?
So here's the thing. Just like a muscle, if the joint that the muscle controls is injured, well, then exercising that muscle is going to be tough. Okay. If the brain is not getting its proper nutrition and fuel, then doing brain exercises is going to create more oxidation. Okay. Let's just, so we want to look and we want to know basic things. Is the person anemic? Right. And there's many different kinds of anemia. There's probably a dozen or more different types of anemia. But the word anemia means the inability to deliver oxygen. And oxygen is probably, it's your brain is 2% of your body weight, and it uses about a third of your oxygen at times. So there's no more oxygen sensitive organ in the body than the brain. Anemia means the inability to efficiently deliver oxygen by your red blood cells. And a simple blood test, a CBC, a $6 test that all doctors do, can give you a lot of information. Do you have enough red blood cells? Are they the right size? Are they at the right percentage? Those are all things, is there the proper amount of protein called hemoglobin in the red blood cells? Because if you have a even mild anemia or subclinical anemia, that's going to place a demand. So if you try to exercise your brain and you can't deliver the fuel, there's going to be a problem there. So
because the brain does need oxygen, fuel, and then the third one is stimulation. But you're right, you need to put things in order to make sure that there's enough gas or energy to the brain. Otherwise, good point.
Yeah. And then, so I'm sorry, the question was...
The third one was the stimulation. So now that, people know that they have enough oxygen, that they have enough fuel to the brain and not necessarily glucose, because I think people default to glucose. You've explained that point with the ketone, and now the stimulation.
Yeah. So from a stimulation standpoint, there's no better way to stimulate the brain than to move in your environment. So motion is life. We're chiropractors. We know that. The degree to which you are flexible, and we can add the degree to which your spine is flexible, is a degree to which you are aging. So simple things like being able to get up off of the floor, right? That's pretty simple. Being able to do 50 push-ups if you're over the age of 40, being able to do 30 push-ups if you're over the age of 50 or 60. Maintaining muscle strength and muscle mass. So what you'll find is that you get older and you kind of put your pants on and your belly is growing and your ass is disappearing. Well, that's a problem, because if we were to look at the hallmarks of aging, it's neurodegeneration, like we've been talking about. And then the other two is muscle weakness and loss of muscle size. Those are the three things that define aging. So if you were to say to me, I have no time to exercise, I can put in 2 sessions a week, what should I do? My answer is weightlifting if you're over the age of 40. Preserving muscle strength and muscle mass is paramount, because when your body moves in your environment, going hiking, going for a walk, etc., you are feeding information from that gravitational stress to a part of your brain back here called the cerebellum, which fires everything going on here. So motion is probably the most important thing. Now, can you go straight here and do cognitive puzzles and things like that? Yes. Only if the movement system is optimized, only if the fuel delivery system is optimized, and you're not creating excessive oxidation because of glucose.
That's awesome. And thank you. Like I said, you and I could chat about this for probably an hour. And very good point with the stimulation, because I think a lot of people default to the more cognitive, and movement is so key. So thank you for reminding us of that. So Steve, at the end of each podcast, I like to ask my guest what their favorite quotes are, quote or quotes. I think you have one that you prepared. If you don't mind sharing that with us, that'd be great.
Sure. Now, again, being chiropractors, you and I, we like to get our health from our lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And even in the world of nutritional supplements, which you and I are both advocates of, I always say you do not find your health in a plastic bottle. We can use what's in the plastic bottle medicinally, whether it be natural supplements or even medication at times, to move the needle and make change, but that should be temporary. So the quote comes from one of the forefathers of our profession, really the philosophical leader of our profession, Dr. B.J. Palmer. And he said, have you more faith in a spoonful of medicine than in the power that animates the world?
That's huge.
The power that animates the world comes through our nervous system, comes through the earth, comes from the sun, comes through our food, comes through interactions with each other. Mm-hmm. Wow, and that's what we should have faith in.
Yeah, that is a powerful quote. So, Steve, thank you so much for your time. If the listeners want to find out more about you and what you do, you're in the New York City, New Jersey area. How can they reach you? And if you have, blogs or sure. I think you have a podcast too. So please tell the listeners and the viewers where they can find you and listen to you some more.
Sure. My website is drstevengee.com. So it's Dr. Steven with a V and then the letter G.com. And that's kind of where I have all of my health articles in my blog spot. And everything there is written by me. It's really all the things that I think about. And you can also link to different podcasts or videos that I've been a guest on. I also am a consultant and a formulator for a small nutritional supplement company called Serene Labs, Cyrene labs.com. And Serene Labs is a small company that's growing in what we're offering, but it's really this basic premise where we use nutritional supplements medicinally, and we try to use as few as possible for the shortest amount of time as possible to create the biggest impact. And supplemental ketones is something that I've definitely been working with.
Thank you so much, Steve, for your time. So this was Dr. Nathalie Beauchamp for the What the Heck podcast. And if I have to recap on, one thing that becomes a key point for Steve when it comes to health, it is lifestyle, that there's no one size fits all. But that being said, there's a lot that we can do. Sometimes we blame our genes a little bit too much. And I think that's a huge message here, that there's a lot that we can do to make sure that we age well and we live longer. So until next time, stay well. This was Dr. Nathalie Beauchamp. I'm Dr. Nathalie Beauchamp, and this is What the Heck, the podcast that dives into what the heck is going on in the world of health and well-being, explores how to optimize your mindset and your lifestyle, and shares practical tools so that you can achieve your fullest potential. Join me and a special guest each week as we discuss everything from biohacking to diet personalization to cutting-edge detox methods to setting and staying accountable to your goals. Ready to find out what the heck you can do to stay healthy, sharp, and at the top of your game? Let's get started. This has been a Wellness on the Go production.